Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Welcome. Today we have a special guest speaker, Angad Singh from Sadhana Constructions from Perth, Western Australia. We have had the privilege to deal with this lovely gentleman from Western Australia for the last few weeks, and we thought it'd be a wonderful opportunity to introduce himself to our listeners. And we definitely feel like there's lots of opportunity for us to work in Perth with various locations, and we would love to find out more about this up and coming construction building firm in Western Australia. Welcome, Dr. Angad Singh.
Thank you, Min. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
Mate, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Look, so the majority of my day I spend working in our building company. Our building company is called Sadhana Constructions. We're a boutique company specializing in, let's say, bespoke property developments, typically ranging from maybe 2 to 10 houses at a time, usually targeting high-quality infill style locations. What we do is we basically take a project from concept right through to completion. So we offer a full design and construct service. We have a team of architects, interior designers, estimators, schedulers, construction managers, the works. And we've been doing this probably for about 7 years now. I think I started developing my own property about 10 years ago, and then since then I've kind of fallen in love, and here we are today. On top of that, I'm the co-founder and host of our organization called Perth Property Developers. We're a community-driven organization for local developers, by local developers, really. We were established in 2018, and since then we've grown into the largest community of developers here in WA.
Wow. Is that just for developers and builders, or is there also investors in there as well?
Yeah, look, there's a whole works, but mostly it's actually for developers more than builders and investors as well. So the property development is really a craft, and the more you get into it, the more you learn that there's so much to learn. And Perth it's really going from a transition from a big mining town into like an urban metropolis, right? And through this transition, there's a whole bunch of challenges that we're going to have to navigate through. So things like an urban sprawl or an aging population or affordability crisis, you name it. And the way that the state government plans to navigate through these challenges is really through these small infill developments. So they're expecting at least 47% of new houses in WA, or in Perth rather, have to come from these infill developments. And this is exactly the type of developments that we do and our 1,700 members at Perth Property Developers engage in. And if you think about it, that means that they are quite literally building the Perth of the future. They're building the city today that our kids are going to grow up in. And so we think it's really important that they get, the information, the inspiration, they get to network, they get the support that they need so that they can do a good job.
Wow.
And so that's what we do. Yeah, we basically host events, we run education, we run day courses, webinars, and really just try to bring the community together and obviously, share our experience in development and everyone else's as well.
That's wonderful. I hope that one day we get to come over to visit you guys in Perth.
Yeah, I think you've got to be a guest speaker for us too, mate.
Well, we'll do. Now, more to the point, SDA and NDIS.
Yes.
I'm sure many people in Australia don't realise that NDIS has only been recently rolled out in the last year or so. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I think WA was the last state to adopt the system, and WA, maybe different to the other states, was already in terms of the property sense, the property market was in a pretty dire spot over the, basically the tail end of the late teens or the, 2015 through till about, really now. And so there was a very little uptake. And there was too much risk as well. People didn't really understand what was going on. I mean, the design guidelines were only released in, I think, October of 2019. And since then, I would say that is when the first, that's when we started having a look at the space, trying to understand what's going on. And, by the time developments get off the ground, now is when we're all rolling it out, I guess.
Mm. Have you been in to visit or inspect many other building firms display of HPS, NDIS products or other apartments of developers in Western Australia at all?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things, I guess, being in a small town is that everyone's still very collaborative and people are really helping each other. And not just myself, we actually take the whole team. So we take the architects, we take the interior designers, we even take our construction managers just to go through completed products so that we get a good sense of what they need to look like at the end. Plus, our seal provider has also taken us through some of their special facilities, where they would point out features that they really like. Oh, could you do this in the bathrooms? It makes it easier for us to, serve these people. And so, yeah, we've inspected quite a few at all different classes as well, both from high physical support right through to improved livability.
That's awesome. Mm. And what is your team, your internal team, their opinion of the quality of the builds out there?
It varies, I would say. Look, the design guidelines that are provided for SDA may be a good way to think of them as like a minimum requirement rather than a fit for purpose or an optimum requirement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So we've seen the works. We've seen developments which are really fantastic, and we've seen developments which are pretty average. And then obviously, there is complying to the guidelines, but then even within the compliance range, there's a range of products and selections which range in quality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, sometimes it doesn't matter so much, especially if you're just trying to do one development and sell it. But certainly if you're trying to be an investor and own these properties on an ongoing basis, and you want to make sure that the participants are having a great experience in these properties, it really does begin to matter, what type of products and fixtures you're going to be using, whether you're going to go with a paving on your driveway, which can collapse and cause all sorts of problems, versus having a concrete driveway. I mean, little things like that would tend to make a big difference, actually.
Yep, exactly. I'm looking at these stats on our website, and it looks like in the pipeline there's only 2 robust builds in Western Australia and 12 fully accessible and 98 HPS. So these are under construction. And I would say that most of those 98 HPSs would be 1-bedroom units.
That's right.
Or two bedroom units.
Yes.
So again, this is because the market is just brand new in Western Australia. Are we seeing a lower number going under construction? Because as you told me offline about a week ago, the Western Australian mentality as investors is going to be a slower uptake, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Kind of unique product. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, remember, I think WA actually had one of the better disability systems in the country. So there wasn't people were quite happy with what was going on before. So moving to the NDIS system, where there was already resistance there, hence we were the last state to adopt it. And then maybe there's, still a small town mindset of WA. And maybe the other thing is, when we started this journey, which is probably, actually about 4 years ago now, back then, right, you would contact a seal provider and ask about even the most basic things. Oh, have you heard of SDA? No one had even heard of it. You ask a seal provider, oh, well, how do I get a participant? And no one has any idea. Oh, how does the funding work? No one has any idea. And what happened was, obviously there was the early adopters, and they got the calculator from the NDIS website, and they figured out which one would return the most yield, and it's the single bedroom apartment. However, back then there was very little understanding of how the NDIS funding works. So, now I think people are being a little bit more realistic as to what types of units and developments will actually have participants that have suitable funding for them. It's been a learning curve, man.
And just so our listeners can understand, there's been a lot of precedent or proof, the proof in the pudding,
yes,
showing that the 1-bedroom units for HPS doesn't work. Okay.
Yep.
We're in Wollongabba, Brisbane here, and there's a whole bunch of apartments done by the Summer Foundation with Macquarie as the investor. And most of them are empty.
Yes.
Because the one I mean, put yourself, the best way for people to understand this is if you were a single person living in a small unit by yourself as a one-bedder, how would you feel? Let alone being in a wheelchair, right? With people coming and going and a second backup wheelchair. And, it's just hard. Everything's always harder to be disabled.
Yes.
And in theory, it sounds great. The highest yield, the one bedroom. I mean, it sounded great 2-3 years ago from all these fund managers and sophisticated investors.
Yes.
And developers. But at the end of the day, the number-driven, yield-driven people who do the calculations in the background to make these products don't realize that it's human beings who need this environment, which is more fit for purpose. And only now, after the fact, that we're seeing so many of these being empty because they just built the wrong way, designed the wrong way. Sorry, So hopefully the mistakes that the Eastern Seaboard of Australia, with regards to too many HBSs, too many apartments, can really go back to more of a weighted balance of supply and demand in the right locations, because the biggest risk there really is the government risk, and we've seen the last 6 to 12 months pushback in the government of not wanting to fund too many single occupant 2-bedroom apartments for SDA.
That's right.
And there's more, and it's at the end of the day, government to government, they want to spend less money, and it's always talk about cost blowout and everything.
Yes.
And they want to see more cost efficient, dwellings out there. Anyway, look, we're going off track here. It's all about you. So,
back to me.
Your company. How many years? What have you guys been building and developing the last few years, and why now into SDA?
Yeah. Look. Okay. So we would do the vast majority of our book would be small to medium scale boutique residential developments. Now, these would range from a couple of villas to luxury townhouses with $1 million build price each. The common theme, I guess, is that they're designed and constructed with a developer's mindset, where we're going for a target market. We're trying to be competitive in a particular market space. We are really trying to do our best to optimize the developer's outcome, if that makes sense, right? And see, from that, we do our own projects as well. So if you look at our overall book, probably about, maybe 30% of what we do is our own internal projects. So we would engage we would buy the land and we would do the developments. And then the balance is for clients. And a lot of the clients that we work with are, people from our community or people that we've been working with for many years. So that's what we currently do. Why are we getting into SDA now? Or maybe that feels like a strange question, because I feel like we've been in SDA for 4 years already, right? Is just now.
I think I should have asked the question: why go to SDA?
Yes. So I have a medical background, right? So I'm a dentist by training, although I don't see patients anymore. So I think that what we're seeing currently with the SDA rollout is probably the largest opportunity that we will see in our lifetime in the residential property space. And if anyone, we can talk about this at length at another time. What they're doing is they're effectively changing what was the previous disability system into something that is a bit like Medicare. So when Medicare rolled out, I think it was the late 80s or maybe 90s, what happened was, through that change, it gave us the ability to go see any doctor that we wanted with a Medicare card, and then they pay the gap, right? Before that, there was just individual clinics that we'd have to see, and then the service was average and the wait times were huge and all of this, right? So allowing the private market for doctors and things like that to start engaging with the public, that model really took off and did great things for healthcare in general. The same thing is happening for people with disabilities. And so I think that what we're seeing at the moment, especially in the SDA space, is just scratching the surface. So we were always drawn to it. Plus, I had a few patients who, when we designed our clinics, we had a few patients that came through and gave us some feedback around how we should do things. So I was always quite, I guess, maybe just interested or curious about the space.
Mm.
When we saw that it was rolling out, I can say that it took the first year was about making calls, trying to figure out who you're going to team up with, trying to understand the system. And truthfully, you have to go through that process. But at the end of that process, all you've done is learn. You haven't really achieved anything, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And for the first year, let me tell you, we were trying to do this ourselves because I didn't know who to ask for help at the time. And it was, up and down, let's say. Eventually, we came across we came across Community Housing Limited, who is the largest provider of disability accommodation, and I formed a really great relationship with the state manager there, and they really held our hand through the whole process. We actually went through a full redesign of the project once they helped us, identify a SIL provider that would be engaged from the beginning. They helped us formulate a plan for how we would actually gain participants, and really, that's what drew us to it. It's just such an exciting form of development. But it came. I think it's a great opportunity for us at the moment as developers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned to me last week that you have been working on, one project,
mm-hmm.
which is that duplex design one,
mm-hmm.
and it'd been like 3.5 years in the making.
Yes.
Now, without mentioning too many names of other companies,
mm-hmm.
why did it take 3.5 years, and what were the challenges, and what have you learned out of that process?
Yeah. We've learned heaps out of the process, but let me maybe summarize it. So the first thing I think that was really important for us is to get SIL provider and SDA provider engagement very, very early on in the process. And when I say early on, I want them to see the site even before we placed an offer or secured it, and give their feedback. Now, obviously, we can check the NDIA demand data, and that is informative to an extent, but I really don't feel like it's as informative as the people who are in the trenches, who are working with participants in those particular locations. Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
Yeah. Then the other thing I would say is selecting those locations is one thing, and when we do a development for let's just say we're doing a beautiful townhouse in Leederville that's designed for a double income, no kid couple, price point's getting about $1.5 million, right? That's day to day for us. Now I can relate to that person. I understand what I want to see. I understand what features are going to make that property stand out for me. I understand, I can see what else is on the market. I can, go through realestate.com and I can see some development rules and all this. And I've got a pretty good sense of how to be a competitive product from a quality and price point perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But I have no experience living with disability. So getting that engagement from the people who have experience either with disability or close to people with disability, and getting them to provide you with feedback around your design, I think is absolutely paramount. That was the mistake that we made the first time around. And I wouldn't even call it a mistake. It was just part of the journey. I didn't know anyone that could help. But I didn't want to stop moving. So we just did the design the best we could.
Yeah.
Turns out, there's a better way, which we've now discovered. So it's just part of the journey. But yeah, that's probably the biggest learning. And the rest, honestly speaking, for us, it's what we do every day. There's nothing that different about it. Yes, now you need an SDA certification on top of your other approvals. Yes, now you need, a class 3 instead of a class 2 or a class 1 that we would typically build. But it's still the overall process, the council process is identical, the actual mechanics of how the deal goes through. Other than a few minor nuances, it's just a development. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Are there many competitors or peers in the marketplace doing similar work to what you guys are doing?
I think we're just establishing at the moment. So there's probably a few builders who are doing this. There's probably a few developers who are doing this. Certainly the SEAL providers that we work with, they have a few builders that they're partnered with. But yeah, it's really just emerging. You know what I mean? I don't think there's any major players yet, but it's all coming together now.
I think what you guys are doing there in your company is absolutely amazing, working in the infill areas. Too many of the project builders are working in the new estates, and that's all they want to do. They don't want to go near infill areas at all.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that you guys have a SIL provider, a housing provider,
Yeah.
associated with yourselves at the very start
Yeah.
is paramount because, as you say, data can be informal or formal, but nothing beats
Yes.
providers telling you this is the area, this is the street, this is the design we want.
Yeah. And maybe just with that, let's talk about that infill location a little bit, because it's a decision that we made quite deliberately. And I feel other builders have made a different decision. And there's probably pros and cons as always. But let me just explain why we chose infill locations in the first place. So we actually ran some focus groups early on, both with our SIL provider, SDA providers, and some participants. And we really just asked them, what do you want? Where would you want to live? And these are the types of questions that we wanted to hear, but not from a sales agent or someone who doesn't really know. We wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. And what we learned, there was a couple of things that we learned. Firstly, change is hard for anyone, right? It's even harder for someone with disabilities. So when someone has, when they've got an established area and they've got an established network, they've got an established community, that is so important to them, right? So, and then the other thing is, maybe home is where the heart is, right? So maybe really the heart is where the community is. And then the other thing was when these people have all these established, these people around them who they're used to seeing, who become their community, you don't want to move them now, make them half an hour away. So imagine your parents now who live down the road from you. Now they have to drive half an hour to come and see you. That's not how we want SDA to be. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So targeting these infill locations, our criteria with our SIL providers is we want to see that there is already a strong presence of people with disability and SIL and SDA services already there, right? So we're trying to keep people inside their established communities where they want to be, right? And then within those communities, obviously, we want to create the ability for them to, have a degree of independence and how they live their lives. So we want to make sure that, local shops, public transport, all of these things are accessible and close by. And when you put those two together, you really land on these infill areas because they already have the established amenity and people are already there. And then maybe as a last point, and this is really for us, especially with our own developments that we're holding our SDAs, is we want to make sure that that they're landlocked. We don't want a new estate where 1,000 of these are going to pop up right next door. Yeah. So we're always looking for that scarcity element through our developments. But infill blocks are a lot harder to work with, for sure, because they have different contours, they have different planning requirements on all of this. But this is what we do every day, right? So it's just business as usual for us.
And for our listeners to understand, an example of landlocked
is
Sydney.
Yes.
Right? So they're landlocked. You can't get in there. There's minimal land releases as compared to Melbourne, where you're developing to the west of Melbourne.
Yes.
Keeps going on and on and on. So you'll find more investors going to Queensland and Victoria because of the land releases, because all the space everywhere. And Sydney being an older city and in location, it's just harder to get into. It's all high rise and high density living over there.
Yep.
So I assume Western Australia is like that. There's lots of land being cut up and released and subdivided over the course of the next 5-10 years.
Yes, definitely.
I assume. Yes.
Yeah, and we always target infill developments when we're trying to do townhouses and villas and things like that. So it makes sense to do the same with SDA.
It's wonderful. So do you think you're the only infill builder doing SDA over there in Western Australia?
Look, I'm sure there are others. Although I don't know them personally. I have seen some builders who are advertising some SDAs that they're producing, and frankly, a lot of them are in similar locations to us. So I don't know how deliberate their choice was. Ours was very deliberate, or whether they just stumbled across because they managed to get a good development site, and they were going to do townhouses, but now they're doing SDA.
Yeah. I mean, well, from the numbers here, the pipeline data, there's not many being built.
No,
so, I think that there's not many competitors out there at the moment with you. Yeah. So what's the goal of the company over the next year or two with regards to SDA? And what is it?
Yeah, look, we have some fairly ambitious goals with SDA, I guess. Maybe I'll tell you a little about the services that we provide and what our goals are. So with regards to SDA, we essentially have three, if we identify a development site for SDA, there's three possibilities that will go down. One is that we will, prepare house and land packages and then essentially on-sell those SDAs. Sometimes we will actually package up the entire site and allow a developer to come in, take some of the development profit, and then build maybe 2 or 3 SDAs. We wouldn't do more than that. 2 or 3 is about the right number for us, and we feel that's the right number if you're going to do a small SDA development. And then we're actually building our own portfolio. And I think for us, it's really about holding these assets. I mean, at the end of the day, the reason they're exciting is because of the yield and the fact that you can have an impact investment. You know what I mean? And so we're not looking at this as a, get in and get out type of opportunity. We are, we're looking at this as an opportunity to really build a portfolio of SDA. And that's why, because when we start a deal, what we do is we just find what we think is going to be a great location. And then somewhere along the way, we either sell it or we don't. So, and maybe that's why, every time I talk to you about projects that we've got coming up, I'm so passionate about them, because these are projects that we would do if if you don't sell them, we'll keep them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great philosophy to have. And that's, I think, if only more builders and developers out there in the marketplace had that mentality, that would help with the rollout of more product in Australia. So what's up and coming projects that you have up your sleeve at the moment?
Yeah, so we got 2 actually. I think
yes,
we got 2 that we were talking about. Now the first one, which is the one that I was telling you about, this is actually really great. We've managed to get 2 blocks in a boutique subdivision, which is about 25 kilometers southeast of the Perth CBD. Yes. Now what's great about these 2 blocks is, firstly, they're in an area where the average block size is maybe 200 square meters, right? Wow. But these blocks are 493 square meters, which is awesome for us.
So go back a little bit. The average block size is 200 square meters.
Yes.
So what's in this area?
Villas, townhouses. It's an infill area.
Exactly. Expensive new or older villas?
It's established, so there's a full range. So there's still some new ones coming up, but there's also some old ones as well. Yeah. But the zoning it's a medium density zoning. So what they are wanting is essentially to have a block size is about 200 square meters. Now that's important, by the way, because remember, when the councils, they decide where infrastructure is going to go, they base it on the density for those areas, right? Yeah. So when we see areas where they're planning lot sizes of 200 odd square meters, they're planning the infrastructure for those, right? So that's why they've got shops there. That's why they've got support services there, because they're expecting a greater density of people. Yep. Now, for some reason, this particular developer elected, rather than doing 8 tiny blocks, they did 4 large blocks. Yeah. Now that's a development choice, and good on them for doing it that way. But for us, this location for a 200 square meter block, it's probably too small for SDA. Do you know what I mean? With SDA, it's really about making the houses really spacious and having, a couple of living areas, and the bedrooms have to have a nice degree of privacy, and really making sure that, you don't want to make them pokey. Do you know what I mean? So the extra space is super important for us. So that's the first thing, is that these blocks are in a location of medium density, which means they're very well supported. I mean, I think there's an Aldi maybe 2 or 3 minute walk away. There's a train station maybe 500, 600 meters away. There's a Woolworths, there's McDonald's, KFC, all the works, right? If someone wanted to live in this location, even if they were in a wheelchair, they could make their way around. They could get to the city with no problems. They could, they could go shopping. They could get, they could get some fast food. They could catch up with people. And obviously, the degree of disability is different. But they could live that independent lifestyle in this particular location, which is something that was really appealing to us.
Yep.
The fact that we've managed to get block sizes which are more than double the size inside this location just means that we can create a really great SDA product rather than a normal villa or something like that. And then maybe the last feature, which, we're always looking for ways that we can, in any of our developments, try to build in a feature. We call it a hero piece, right? Mm-hmm. So our goal for our normal developments is that you imagine that you've just marketed a brand new townhouse in one of the upper market areas. Now you're going to get maybe 50 buyers come through, and they're going to have been through 50 properties, right? And when they're going home, the wife's going to turn around to the husband and say, "Hey, I really like that one. You know that one with the ... Finish the sentence, right? So what is that thing about your development that's going to stand out from the bunch, right? And I think when you approach SDA developments, you really got to think about it the same way. It's not a competitive space yet, but maybe it will be. But even if it doesn't, it's still great to have something that people are proud of in their homes or something special and unique. Do you know what I mean?
Well, in the SDA space, we call it future-proofing.
Future-proofing, sure.
Yeah. So our listeners understand that, there are many ways to future-proof your property. And that is, you want to stand out so that one day when there is another 5-10 houses in the next door suburb, what makes us different, and it could be something aesthetic at the front, could be something internal. There could be features in the backyard, whatever it may be.
Exactly.
But it has to stand out.
Yeah. And because we've got the large size, we have a lot of play with the design. And because they're side by side, we actually have an opportunity to potentially, be able to open up the fence in the backyard and connect the two backyards if we design it right, such that they can have some communal activities and, some interaction and stuff like that. And I really think that that's a unique opportunity that I haven't seen in other blocks like this. And maybe part of our goal, both with our seal provider and our SDA, is we're really trying to create a living experience for these participants, right? Which is really about community and interaction and engagement and all this. So
one of our previous podcast guests was called Adapt Housing.
Yes.
And the CEO, David Whitelaw, keeps on telling us all the time, those side-by-side blocks are gold.
Yes.
Because it allows a provider to actually have running two houses side by side, and having two staff running back and forth, looking after all the participants is the key way to maximizing efficiency and just having another hands-on person next door to help out with all the participants. That's because, in a 24-hour window, there's 3 carers, 8-hour shifts.
Yes.
They're coming and going. And there's probably, 7 or 8 different carers throughout the whole week. On a shift rotation like that, and having all that in one location makes it much more easier for the seal business to operate their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe if people do end up working with us, this is probably a good time for me to explain why our process takes longer than some of the project builders. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you're dealing with a block out in a new estate, they've all got standard dimensions. They're all flat. They're all got the same soil. It's cookie cutter. You get the same design. Bang, bang, bang. Right. But we take pride in approaching every development from scratch. Yeah. So every single project that we do, our architect will look at it like it's the first site they've ever done. So we always do a solar analysis on every site. We want to make sure that the houses are light and bright and they capture the best, solar angle, and that they're designed with solar passive principles in mind. We want to make sure that we're utilizing any natural features, views, things about the block that are special, especially when you've got something so amazing like a side-by-side lot. We want to make sure that, let's just say on one side there's a street that's a bit busier. We want to make sure that we position the outdoor living areas such that they have a bit more privacy and amenity. You know what I mean? So with us, if someone else tells you, oh, here's a block, can you get me a design tomorrow? Maybe a project builder can do that and they get something. For us, every single design is from scratch, which means it takes 2 to 3 weeks at least.
Yes.
Right? So I just thought I'd if anyone does end up working with us and they'll say, how come these guys take 3 weeks to put designs together? That's why.
They're not slow.
It's just done with care. Yeah. And I think it has to be. Yeah.
Yes. So the providers you're working with now, please don't mention their names, the housing provider and the civil provider, are they happy with your service and your company? And do they appreciate what you guys do?
Yeah. I mean, they have been so helpful for us. And in return, we have done everything we can and they've voiced, immense gratitude for that. And one of the things that we did that they were really grateful for was we have essentially workshops with them. So our interior designer will prepare a specification, color scheme, inclusions and all of this, and they'll go to them and go through what they would like. And they have an opportunity to actually comment earlier. So like little things, they would say, oh, we don't like this floor. It's actually not going to work for us because it's going to be this problem. And we didn't foresee the problem. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. They ask for certain types of tapware, or please don't put cabinetry there. It's actually harder for us to clean. Please don't put that type of thing. Oh, okay. Interesting. So yes, they've been really great with us and they've expressed gratitude. And we actually have an ongoing monthly meeting where we're constantly in conversation because we've got, you've only seen a few of our projects, but we've got a handful of others that are in different stages of development.
Yeah.
Mm.
And do they have a healthy pipeline of participants who need assistance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and when we've engaged with multiple different seal providers in the past, and these guys, in my opinion, are the absolute best. They've been operating for over 30 years, both the seal provider and the SDA provider, and they're top tier. Now, I know the SDA provider might be slightly more expensive. I mean, they maybe charge a couple of % more in management fees or whatever. But for us, that was a no-brainer, because having the network, having the established reputation, having the experience to really, deliver a great, service was much more important to us than a % here or there.
Yes.
So, yeah, and we always actually start marketing our property from basically the day we start design. As soon as we've got the concept designs, our seal provider will put it onto their website, onto their platform, and they have dedicated engagement officers now. So they're constantly trying to engage with participants and putting designs in front of them and SDAs and locations to try to find the best fit for the individual participants. And so they've got this basically a database, you would say, of participants at different stages through their funding process with their needs. And so the idea is, as soon as a property is there, they should be able to, by then they've already sourced the right participants. They give themselves plenty of lead time, because they're also trying to make sure that the people that live together will like each other. So there's like a personality profiling, which I really liked. Other seal providers didn't do that. And they try to make sure that, there's just going to be a happy, peaceful environment in the house, which I felt like they understood better than any of the other providers that I spoke to.
That's wonderful. So are there any areas in Perth that you do not operate in terms of locality?
Look, you would say our radius, you would maybe, if you put Perth in the middle, we'll probably go maybe 35, 40 Ks out. And the reason is we're so busy. Like we haven't taken on a new client for over 2 years, right? Just our existing clients, because they're developers, they're always finding new sites. They're always getting new sites. We stick to, somewhere that's manageable for our construction managers to get to.
Yes.
Are you asking me as a builder or as a developer?
Well, both. Yeah.
Yeah. As a builder, look, if you've got a site and you're one of our clients, we'll support you the best way that we can, provided it doesn't, mess up our business. So if you want me to develop in any particular location, then sure, we'll do that. As a developer, we have to be much more picky, because remember, we have a stake in the outcome, which depends on the overall success of the development, which is not just the construction. You have to find the site, you have to sell the product at the end. So with that, I would actually say there's probably only a handful of locations that we would go. It's probably easier to tell you where we would be. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, and that changes as well. We're constantly monitoring, supply and demand statistics. We're constantly looking at approvals. We're constantly speaking to agents, just to get a sense of, where we think certain areas are gonna go well or not.
Have you looked into the robust category as a design for your product in the future?
Honestly, not a great deal, but since your encouragement, we have started the process. So I think if you give us about another 3 months, we'll have a full spec and standard built for that, and then we can go down that path.
Well, at the moment in Western Australia, there's 0 hybrids in the pipeline, so you could be the first if you do it.
Yeah, and after you told me about the robust, I spoke to my seal provider, and they said everyone wants robust. They said if you had robust, it would be so easy. But people are scared of robust accommodation. I think there's a view that the properties will get trashed. But I think if careful planning and management can probably mitigate that to some extent.
Exactly. Well, we look forward to seeing you write the first one.
All right. Is this your brainchild, the hybrid elements? Okay, we should talk about this more. Interesting idea.
Mate, any final words of advice that you have to people out there who's listening?
Yeah.
On what you've learned the last 2 years or so, and what you can advise them to consider?
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe the one piece of advice is know who your customer is with SDA. And your customer for SDA is the participant. Whether you're a builder and you think that you're selling to an investor and they're your customer, they're not, or at least they're not your ultimate customer. Everything that you do, from the conception through the design to the construction and completion of your dwelling, I think you'll get a great outcome or a much better outcome if you remain participant focused, and then making sure that you're engaging with the people who can give you as close to participant feedback as you can get, which is your SIL providers and your SDA providers. And of course, if you do have access to participants, talking to them too. Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right, mate.
Mate, your website, you want to explain your
Yeah, sure.
domain?
So you can, sadhanaconstructions.com.au, you can look us up there. I would also encourage that you jump on Facebook and search Perth Property Developers. That's our free community group for developers. That's where we're most active, and that's where you'll hear about all of our events and webinars and podcasts and all of this stuff that we're doing. So jump on that, hit join, and you'll see a lot of our stuff and all of our developments, including our non-SDA stuff. Hopefully we'll see you there.
Wonderful. Hey, good. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, brother. We'll talk
Bye-bye.
soon. Ciao.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.